Clara woke craving a bold leap, odd, since 60-year-old knees usually protested such notions. Sunlight hit her late husband's battered copy of Middlemarch on nightstand, its spine cracked like her heart last winter. But today? Today smelled of Earl Grey and rebellion. She'd seen that indie bookshop's event board, Grief and Pages, a club swapping novels instead of platitudes. No sad-eyed weirdos here, just stories, strong tea, and maybe a new femme. Clara laced up her docks, grinning. London's Clara's craving for boldness felt absurd beside her morning tea, steaming, dependable, just like her routine since James passed. Yet there it was, that itch beneath her skin, like a library book overdue for return. She eyed novel on her nightstand, its spine cracked where he'd last folded a corner. Grief had turned her into a reluctant archivist, preserving crumbs of their life together. But today, dust motes danced in sunlight, an idea of another silent evening made her wince. London streets hummed as she shuffled past Bookshop on Elm Road, its window announcing community book swap, bring stories, find fam. A poster flapped in breeze, corners peeling like her resolve. What if she fumbled this? 60 years of living, and still, new things made her knees knock like a teenager's. But then, memory flickered. James, grinning over dog-eared pages, whispering Clara love, even Dickens needed editors. Inside, paperbacks formed a patchwork quilt of lives lived. A woman with neon glasses waved her toward a circle of mismatched chairs. Clara hovered, clutching her old novel like a life raft, until someone nudged a biscuit her way. Laughter bubbled up, she'd forgotten how it felt, this lightness, like spring cracking winter's grip. By dusk, her hands were empty, but her chest? Full as a librarian's trolley. Book she'd brought now nestled in another's bag, its next chapter unknown. And maybe, just maybe, hers was too. Clara's craving for boldness led her down cobbled streets toward a bookshop she'd passed 100 times but never entered. Its faded awning flapped like a beckoning hand. Inside, shelves bowed under weight of stories, and a chalkboard announced community book swap, bring one, take one, share stories. Her fingers traced spines until landing on a battered copy of Middlemarch, its pages yellowed but holding that particular vanilla and ink scent of comfort. A sticky note peeked out, for next dreamer, E. She nearly missed gathering in back, a mismatched circle of chairs, half filled with folks clutching novels like life rafts. A woman with silver braids and a neon green scarf waved her over. New blood. Sit, fam. We're swapping tales of lost loves and found courage. She hesitated, clutching Middlemarch to her chest like armor. 60 years of habit whispered she didn't belong, but her knees betrayed her, sinking into a squashy armchair that smelled faintly of cat. Turns out, book swaps weren't just about trading paperbacks. They were passports. Each week, woman returned, bringing dog-eared favorites and leaving with fresh wounds and balms in equal measure. She learned to spot regulars, retired teacher who annotated mysteries with baking tips, widower who only read thrillers to feel something, teen who hid poetry in cookbooks for strangers to discover. Their stories tangled with hers, stitching a patchwork of grief and grit. One rainy Thursday, she opened Middlemarch to find a new note wedged between pages. Clara, dive deeper. Your turn to lead next week. E panic fizzed in her throat. She'd never led anything beyond PTA meetings decades ago. But that night, under a lamplight's glow, she scribbled notes in margins, underlining passages where characters stumbled toward grace. By dawn, her hands shook less. When day came, she fumbled opening remarks, knocking over a tower of donated books with her elbow. Group erupted in laughter, teen snorting tea through her nose. Classic rookie move, widower chuckled, writing pile. And just like that, fear dissolved. Creator spoke of Eliot's quiet heroes, how grief could be a slow reveal, not an ending. Hands reached for tissues, but also biscuits, passed with nods, no words needed. Afterward, neon scarf woman, Edwina, she'd learned, pressed a fresh novel into her palms. Keep going. We've got your back. Inscription inside read, for woman who forgot she's protagonist. Clara walked home lighter, Middlemarch now a bookmark in her own story, its edges softened by use. London's drizzle felt less like morning and more like a promise. Turn page, love. There's always another chapter. Clara's craving for boldness felt ridiculous over morning tea. 60-year-olds didn't leap, they sipped Earl Grey and muttered about hip replacements. Yet there she was, dusting off a dog-eared copy of Middlemarch, its spine cracked from decades of companionship. Grief had clung like stale perfume since losing James, but books? Books never left. She marched into that quirky indie bookshop off Chiswick High Road, ignoring sideways glances from millennials browsing dystopian lit. A community board near register screen possibilities, poetry slams. Author Q&As. And then, book swap for broken hearts. Clara snorted. Whoever named it deserved a medal for bluntness. Signing up required stubbornness she hadn't tapped in years. What if they pitied her? Or worse, ignored her? But novel in her bag, James's favorite, margin scribbled with his terrible jokes, felt like a nudge. She'd swap stories, not just paperbacks. First meeting night, rain lashed windows as strangers shuffled in, clutching their own battered treasures. A woman with neon reading glasses winked. Fam calls this my divorce Bible, she said, waving a battered Eat, Pray, Love. Laughter bubbled up, unexpected. Clara's grip on her own book loosened. Months later, she'd read memoirs thicker than her thumb, debated fictional murders over digestives, and, once, cried into a first-edition Pride and Prejudice. Not all leaps ended in flight. Some were messy, graceless stumbles. But every dog-eared page, every shared silence over a perfect paragraph, knitted something inside her back together. One evening, shelving swapped books, Clara paused. That old Middlemarch was gone. In its place? A sci-fi novel with a sticky note for lady who laughs her own puns. James would have approved. Grief, she realized, wasn't a solo journey. It was a library, crowded, chaotic, full of voices saying, turn page. We are here. Creator woke craving a bold leap, odd, since 60-year-old knees usually protested such notions. But grief had carved hollows in her routine, and today, fingers tracing cracked spine of an old novel left by her late husband, she decided, no more tiptoeing. London's drizzle couldn't dampen this fire. She marched into a bookshop event, heart pounding louder than tube trains. Red chalkboard. Skeptical glances followed her, especially from Marjorie, a sharp-eyed regular who'd scoffed emotional bibliotherapy. Woman ignored them, clutching her symbol, that dog-eared novel, its margin scribbled with her husband's wit. Then, gutsy move, she climbed onto a chair, ignoring one knee's audible pop, and announced a community book swap. Not just any swap. Each participant would leave a note inside their donated book, a secret message for next reader. Life's worth capturing, she declared, voice steadier than she felt. Silence. Then Marjorie rolled her eyes. Clara's twist? She'd spent weeks mastering calligraphy, inscribing 50 copies of her old novel with handwritten quotes about resilience. As folks flipped through pages, someone gasped. A teen found a note, "You're braver than yesterday's tea." Laughter rippled. Marjorie, stiff-backed, opened a copy, and froze. Inside, she had penned her husband's favorite joke. Woman's stern face crumpled into a smile. Someone snapped a photo. By evening, BookSwap heels trended locally. A literary magazine slid into Clara's DMs, "Give us this story." Fam, she'd gone viral in cardigans and sensible shoes. Next meeting, Marjorie brought biscuits and a first-edition Bronte. For swap, she muttered, avoiding Clara's gaze. But her hands lingered on Clara's novel, now a pivot, passed like a torch. Rain tapped windows as shelves emptied, hearts lightened. Clara smirked, watching strangers become keepers of stories and sorrows. Who knew grief could be softened by ink, paper, and one tiny goof of a 60-year-old rebel? Woman woke craving a bold leap, odd, since 60-year-old knees usually protested such notions. But grief had carved hollows even tea couldn't fill, so she dusted off that battered novel from her late husband's shelf, its spine cracked like her heart. London's drizzle blurred line between sky and pavement as she marched into a tiny bookshop, slapped book onto counter, and announced, "Swapping stories, men's souls." "Who's in?" Shopkeeper blinked. Two women lingering over memoirs perked up. By week's end, Clara's had a ragtag femme, a grandma who quoted Austen while knitting socks with mismatched heels, a CEO who hid self-help books inside thriller jackets, even a bloke who swore Proust cured his sourdough fails. They met in backroom nooks, swapping dog-eared paperbacks and unspoken hurts. Creator-guided discussions with a conductor's flair, waving a teaspoon like a baton whenever debates over tragic heroines grew too spicy. Months rolled by, and that old novel, once a relic of loss, became a living thing, passed hand to hand, its margins scribbled with notes like "Bertie would have hated this ending" or "Try Earl Grey with this chapter." Clubs sprouted wings, poetry slams community center, a shelf of donated books labeled "Take One, Leave One" tube station. Clara's odd habit of assigning homework like "read this under a tree and report back" became legend. One frosty evening, as members lugged in tins of shortbread, Clara realized her craving had been answered. Not by erasing grief, but by weaving it into something warm and riotously alive. Bookshop's event calendar now overflowed, proof that stories could stitch hearts back together, one awkward, glorious page at a time. Grab a book, swap your story. Next chapter's yours.